Welcome back to Sound Approach's How-To series. Hello everyone, I'm Trevor Williams, and today we'll be discussing speaker cables. Specifically, we'll be talking about configurations, connections, and conductor metals used in these cables and how they can impact your listening experience. We're here with DJ Taylor, and as you know, he is Sound Approach's in-house subject matter expert and knows all things audio and video. So today we're going to be discussing speaker cables and address some of the most frequently asked questions that we get at Sound Approach about these items. To start, let's get into the importance of picking the right speaker cables for your system.
Trevor, I'd like to reverse on you and go to the end of your presentation to start, because when we receive phone calls from people, the first component that is important to know about is the room.
Yeah.
From the room, we know what electronics and speakers they have.
Okay.
From that, we can determine what we can and can't do with the speaker cable, because we know the quality of their electronics.
Okay.
So if you have a big pair of clipped corner horns, you're going to use one type of cable, versus if you have a pair of little teeny small bookshelf Boston acoustics.
Yeah, I mean, well, each piece is going to be different, and each room is going to be different. Each configuration is going to be different. So it's important to consider all these factors.
Correct.
Okay.
So the biggest factor is price range.
That's the biggest factor for speaker cables?
Of your equipment.
Okay.
Because if you have inexpensive stuff, you're not going to buy a $1,000, $2,000 speaker wire.
Because you're not going to see the benefits that you would.
That's correct. You'll
higher quality.
You'll never hear that difference.
Okay.
So we have to make sure when we're talking to our clients that we gain a level of knowledge about their room, their current equipment, or what they're going to add, and what the product can produce through whatever speaker wire we use.
Okay.
So that becomes very, very, very critical. The cable mix is not always going to be, it's always tributaries from top to bottom. It's not always wire roll from top to bottom. We are looking to select the cable that best fits the needs and the applications.
And are those cables going to impact the audio that the clients are hearing? So if you have a USB from one company, a speaker cable from another company, a power cable from another company, are those going to work differently if they're spread out across different brands, or are they going to work the same? Is it more about the technology in the cable than it is the brand of the cable?
You are right. It's more about the technology inside the cable than it is the cable itself. I would rather pick the right cable for the equipment and our client than just pick everything from one brand, because you're not going to get the same quality from every manufacturer. It's going to vary depending on its use.
So what are the different types of configurations for speaker cables that clients can get?
Well, there are 4 solutions for speakers that connect the electronics to the speakers.
Okay.
And these are sort of, some of these people may never have heard. So we have standard 2 wires.
2 wires. Yeah.
Okay. Then we have what's called bi-wire.
Well, before we get to bi-wire, the standard is typically used for bookshelf speakers, smaller speakers, correct?
No, it can be used for everything.
Everything.
There are some $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 2-wire configurations. Standard.
Okay.
2 out of the amp, 2 into the speaker.
Well, when you see standard configuration, that means 2 cables.
2 cables.
2 to 2?
2 to 2.
Okay. And then we go to bi-wire.
Then you have bi-wire, you have tri-wire, and you have bi-amped.
I knew you were going to say
tri-amp.
I knew you were going to say bi-amp. That's so confusing. I have no idea what it is.
Well, it is confusing.
It is.
So let's stop at bi-wire or tri-wire.
I think that makes sense.
So in a standard configuration, the connections on the back of the speaker is 2.
Yes.
In a bi-wire configuration, you have 4 connections.
Okay.
2 are for usually the high frequency and mid frequency, and 2 for low frequency. Okay. And they are banded together with a strip of some sort, so they function as a 2-wire if you do not buy bi-wire cables.
Okay.
Now, bi-wire is at the speaker end. At the amp end, there is always only 2 wires.
Okay.
So 2 wires out of the amp, 4 wires into the speaker. You're separating the performance level going into the speaker.
Gotcha. Okay.
Tri-wire?
So that's sending power to each different speaker.
That is correct.
Okay, so your woofer, your tweeter.
Tweeter, mid-range, woofer.
Woofer. Got it.
In a tri-wire configuration, there aren't many of those.
Mm-hmm.
Tweeter, mid-range, woofer.
Okay.
Still only 2 wires at the electronics.
Okay.
By amping means that there is 1 amp for high frequency, mid frequency, and a separate amp for the low frequency.
Okay. Oh, so that makes more sense. So you're separating out the lower frequency and powering it
Differently.
And
if you have a tri connection on the back of the speaker,
you can do
3 amplifiers.
Okay.
That is correct. So the other thing that some people get confused about is what connection do you use?
See, that was my next question. Beyond configuration, what else are they going to be considering when it comes to the connections of the cables?
The best termination for speaker cables is bare wire.
So why do they have Spade and bananas?
Convenience.
Okay.
Ease of connection.
Okay.
Maybe older equipment doesn't allow some level of flexibility in some way or another.
Okay.
So for us, when we look at cables and connections to the speaker, bare wire is always the first.
Always the best, because
Always.
that gives you the cleanest transition of signal between the wire and the connector?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Best signal transfer. You have the most amount of wire connected to the post.
Okay.
So next is spades.
Because you have a solid connection.
You have a large surface spade that connects, gives you the next best.
Okay.
After that, you get into what I call the banana pin, a banana connector with a center pin.
Okay.
And then after that, it's a pure just banana pin, banana plug.
And I know bananas are different for every single company out there. You're never going to get the same banana pin that you would from one company to the next. They're all designed just a little bit differently.
Yeah, there are probably 4 different configurations of banana.
Okay.
The most common one is a banana that has 4 little spring clips on the side of it. And over time, that spring tension decreases and your signal conductivity is shot.
It's pretty low.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why a banana with a center pin drive that spreads it out is your best banana to use.
And with spades, don't a lot of times the bare wire connection to the spade itself starts to pull out?
It shouldn't if the spade is soldered in place.
Okay.
If you crimp it on, you can't get enough of a field crimp termination to make it solid.
To make it solid, it would
forever.
need to be soldered.
It should be soldered.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What about the brands like Wireworld that use screw-on terminations?
Well, screw-on is very good because there is no way it can unscrew.
Yeah.
So it's a good
solution.
Very, very, very good.
So
solution.
It's really more about what is necessary for the setup and what is the preference of the person.
It comes back to convenience. If you're 35, 40 years of age, you can get on your hands and knees and get behind your equipment. You can make that bare wire connection very easily.
Yeah.
But if you're 95, how easy is it to get on your hands and knees and do that? Hence, the banana plug. It becomes very easy to manage that connectivity.
Are there limitations on the speakers themselves that may dictate one or the other?
Yes. And it generally goes back to older product versus newer product, because the newer product usually is using a standard sized banana input. Okay. The older product, a bit of a variation.
Well, we have seen this. The binding posts are either a different size than expected, they're too large, and the spades don't fit.
Yes, and that's why you have to have the ability to terminate in the field or in the home. Macintosh is a very good example of that. The 2105 amplifier from 1975, it does not have a banana input. It only has a screw terminal. And it's a small bit of distance between each screw terminal. So you have to use a small spade. All of the manufacturers today don't use small spades, they use big spades because the newer product has 5-way binding post on them. So you can unscrew it, plug the wire in, and screw it down.
And those 5-way binding posts offer for any of the options. You can use a banana, you can use a spade, or
correct. And that's why they're referred to as 5-way binding posts. You have 5 different methodologies of termination. But early vintage product, well, like an old Advent speaker, it has a push terminal and a little small input.
And has to be connected a certain way.
Bare wire. Or a soft pin, which is a termination where the big wire goes on the end of a coupling, and the output of that is a very flexible, high-quality gold, just small enough to fit into that termination point.
I don't think I've come across this.
Most people haven't. But sadly,
well, this is why we're talking to you. You have that knowledge that the rest of us don't have. So, which you've already said your recommendation would be the bare wire. That's the best option.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, are there any other considerations that you make when discussing speaker cables? Like, we've talked about connectors, we've talked about configurations. What about the conductors, the materials themselves?
Some manufacturers use a very thin solid core center.
Okay.
Some manufacturers use a multi-strand weave center. Some manufacturers on the secondary outside of that put a shielding on it. So each one of these determinations should be based on your system and your budget. Now, personally, I'd rather have something that has some shielding and has very good weave twist inside than just have pure solid wire. NASA did a study many, many years ago about frequencies and how they traveled on wires. And they found that some of the upper, mid, and high frequencies specifically traveled on the outside skin of the wire.
Okay.
They found that the base low frequency went through the center of the wire.
Which would make sense because you're talking about a low wave as opposed to a high wave.
Right. So you find manufacturers like Wire Whirl and Tributaries, their wire has 3 different sizes of wire in that one conductor. One for high frequency.
Okay.
One for mid frequency. One for low frequency.
Got it.
Giving you the best performance. But it costs.
But that's design.
That's design.
That's design. That's not talking about the materials at all, because there's several different semi and precious metals that are used.
Well, you have manufacturers using platinum.
Okay.
You have them using gold.
Silver.
Copper.
Copper's the most common, correct?
Yes, and that's because it's the least expensive.
Okay. And there's different ways of processing the copper.
Well, you always want to choose a manufacturer that uses oxygen-free. And the highest level of percent of oxygen freeness is better. 98% is better than 95.
Because the impurities are lower.
Right.
The higher that number.
That is correct.
Okay.
And secondly, when you have oxygen-free copper cables, you want those copper crystals to be as close to each other as they can. And you want them to be aligned north to south poles.
Okay.
Weird stuff.
Yeah.
That most people don't ever think about and don't care about.
That's going deeper into how electronics work.
Right.
And how the electric fields move through the cable.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that, I mean, it makes sense. The cleaner the cable it is.
Yes.
The better the sound will be.
Absolutely.
Because the signal can move through without any disruption or interference.
Correct. Okay. Now, there's something you haven't brought up yet, Trevor, and that is putting wires in the wall, speaker wires in the wall.
I haven't, because it's something that doesn't come up often in my world.
Would you want to reserve that for another time?
No, we can address that. I know that there's a lot of differences between the cables that are being used in a system and run just behind the system or...
Well, let's shortcut that conversation, because most of the people you deal with don't do that. But if you are going to put wires in the wall, there's something called electrical wires you find in the wall. Mm-hmm. And when you have electrical flow through that wire, it puts off a magnetic field referred to as eddy current.
Yeah.
That's a stray RF interference, noise you don't want in your cables.
Yes.
We have discovered, well, I should say not we, NASA discovered many years ago, that if you have 18 to 26 weaves and twists per foot on a 4-conductor wire, you have a natural shielder against that effect.
So you can shield against interference just with the cable itself, just by how it's wrapped?
Yes, or you can buy wire that goes in the wall that has that, like we discussed before, balance cable, a third shielding wire.
Isn't a lot of that technology transferred over to out-of-wall cables too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because it has the same benefit whether or not it's in the cable, it just, or whether or not it's in the wall. It just may be more important in the wall because you do have those electric.
Right.
Okay. And those are poorly shielded, aren't they?
Awful.
Are they shielded at all?
Awful, which is why we use that weave twist configuration to try and mitigate as much of that as we can.
Okay.
So you're talking about $1 a foot stuff for that. You're talking about $5 a foot for a shielded type of on the wall. So is that the
difference between a plenum cable and a...
No. Plenum has to do with fire rating. You don't want to even go. That's commercial stuff. We don't like that.
I don't want to get into that.
No, we don't want to get into that at all. Yeah, let's keep it where it is.
We'll keep it this way.
But you do have manufacturers like Trib or Wire World and AudioQuest and other manufacturers we have that do have wires designed very high end to go in the wall.
Yeah, I know it's common for in-wall speaker cables, and most of the major brands out there do carry in-wall options.
Right.
Because there's a lot of in-wall and on-wall speakers out there that people are running. So they are more expensive though versus a commercial seller.
So now that we're kind of at the end, we're going to go back to the beginning.
Yes, you said we would start in the room.
The room is the key.
The room is the key.
Because if you know the room, you know the size of the room, the height of the room, you know whether you can use wiring in the wall, it has to be laid around the wall. You have an understanding of what you need to pick for the quality of equipment that's there.
Okay.
So when someone calls us and they get me on the phone, I start with asking questions about the room. That allows us to know where to go.
That gets us to which cables you need.
That's it.
Standard, firewire, tri-amping, hopefully not tri-amping. It gets you to Spade or bare wire, definitely use bare wire, and it gets us to the metal.
That's correct.
If you have the budget, get really good metal because it gives you the best.
So,
well, I think that covers everything that we were trying to ask. This is definitely some of our most frequently asked questions from myself and our clients, and I'm sure our viewers will find the information very helpful. So DJ, as always,
thank you.
We appreciate you coming to talk to us about this stuff. And if you have any questions, feel free to visit our website at soundapproach.com and reach out to us. Otherwise, leave a like for this material and comment and subscribe. Thanks again, DJ. Take care.